When I was sitting at my desk holding my resignation letter in my hand, I had this moment of, are you really about to do this? Are you really about to leave this job for this massive question mark? You have to move back into with your mom's house. You have to go find a grunt job just to get by. And what if you don't get hired? It's a lot of question marks, but I realize the greatest things in life are just on the other side of that fear. You have to step out there and take a chance or nothing's ever going to happen to you.
Welcome to Second Act Stories, where we feature people who have made major life and career changes and are pursuing a more rewarding life in a second act. I'm your host, Scott Merritt.
And I'm Andy Levine, Scott's co-host. So Scott, today you traveled to Florida and you interviewed Deputy Royce James of the Volusia County Sheriff's Office. Let's start out, talk a little about his first act.
Sure. Well, after growing up in what he described as the ghettos of Daytona Beach and having, a few odd jobs through his teenage years and even a management position at Burger King, he eventually found his way to financial advising, where he spent a decade helping people to plan for their financial futures.
Now, there's one element of Deputy James's story that is particularly unique. Why don't you just tell us a word about that?
Sure. So this is part of his second act, right? So he found his way out of financial advising and then into law enforcement. But what's really cool about it is that we can all watch him do his job on live TV. There's a show on the Reels channel and streaming on Peacock called On Patrol Live. Every Friday and Saturday night, it's on for 3 hours. And he's one of the cops that they follow regularly.
That is unusual. I don't think we've ever have a guest that is also on TV that we can watch him live. I imagine you're going to start out by discussing how he got into financial advising.
That's right, yeah. What's really interesting about his career is that although he enrolled in college, he never actually finished his degree. Yet he was still very successful in financial advising, but even that wasn't enough for him, so he sought out this incredible career change. In any case, here's how it happened. So how did you wind up in finance? Because you were a financial advisor. That was a career path.
Yes, I did financial-based jobs for approximately 10 years. Quite honestly, I just stumbled into it. I got divorced when I was really young, and I needed a higher paying job. So I decided to leave Daytona Beach and move to Tampa, Florida. And when I moved over to Tampa, I just started looking for a job, and I got hired by Bank of America. I just got hired there as a regular teller worker. Just needed a job and just stumbled in there.
Right. And they didn't require a degree.
No. They required high school. You were at the lowest of the low when I got in there. And financial advising wasn't even on my radar. It was a decent paying job that had decent benefits and a decent retirement plan. And that's all I was interested in at that point.
Royce started as a teller, and he moved through the bank to a number of other positions, eventually landing in the investments division.
I like the complication. I'm a problem solver, so I like the natural complexity of investments.
What was the first indication that that was going to be like the thing that was going to be your career?
Because it was the first time of my younger life where I was actually doing a job that I actually enjoyed. It wasn't just the Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 grind. I actually started to enjoy it. So that's how I knew I need to run with this, because I actually like doing this.
And it was a viable career path.
Very viable career path. Just not at the bank, but when I also worked for a mutual fund company called T. Rowe Price.
Okay.
And I worked for JP Morgan Chase. It was the first time in my life where I knew something that was very complex that the majority of the population does not know. However, it's very important. I like the fact that people are coming into our office looking for our expertise, and I was able to help somebody with a very, very important aspect of their life. I love that.
Was there an ultimate goal in that career? Like, did you have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan?
No. I was just winging it. When I first left Bank of America and joined T. Rowe Price, I was just helping with mutual funds, IRAs, 401k plans, stocks, bonds, options, things like that. And I got promoted to a group called Personal Service Group, I believe it was, where we only assisted people that had high net worth, like of $1 million or more. So I got into that elite aspect of that, and that's where it just took off from there, and I just loved it.
All right, this could be controversial, but what's the best piece of financial advice you could give to everybody listening?
If I could give one piece of financial advice to everybody listening, it would be to pay off debt. Most Americans have fallen in love with debt. We think it's normal to have credit cards that aren't paid off, car loans, credit cards, student loans, personal loans. Paying off debt will free up your income, and then you can use that income to invest in and generate great wealth. So, number one piece of advice, pay off your debt.
Right. No, that's sound advice for everybody.
Thanks.
I love it. So you're well into your career, and at some point, somewhere along the way, you started thinking about leaving financial advising. What prompted that?
What prompted it was a lot of people are listening to the advice we just talked about, paying off debt. What prompted me switching is almost all of the clients who I advise don't listen. I can't teach you how to grow wealth investing in the stock market when you have 20-something% out going on a credit card. It's not going to happen. It got a little old because they're not really listening to me anyway. So that prompted maybe I might want to change.
Did you have a sense of what you wanted to change to?
One day, I was standing up in my financial firm. We're like on the 20th floor, and I'm looking out the window in Tampa, Florida. I'll never forget this day. It's like a profound moment of reckoning. I'm looking down at the interstates and the roads because we're in a skyscraper building, and I saw a line of Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, maybe 6 or 7 of them, and they're weaving through traffic, and I see their blue lights going. And I look down at them, and I go, what are they doing? Where are they going right now? That looks pretty cool. Whatever they're doing, it just looks pretty cool. And I'm just interested. What are they doing? So I went on a ride along. When I went on the ride along, from that moment forward, I knew this was all I ever wanted to do.
So what happens on a ride along? Do they put a vest on you?
My first agency I rode with was actually down south. Before I decided to do this, I rode a lot, because I really wanted to make sure, because this is a very big contrast of career changes, and I don't want to make a mistake by leaving a very good job that I do like for something that I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So I went on a lot of ride-alongs, and some put a vest on me, some didn't. I rode daytime, nighttime, and I did whatever they did.
What do you actually do? Like you go out to a call, like you just kind of stand there and watch?
Yeah, you're an observer. Some people I rode with would let me get a little more involved than others, but my first ride along is where I fell in love with this line of work. I must be honest, my first ride along, and if I'm being serious, we didn't do a damn thing that day. Just the fact that we were out of an office and we're out and about, and we can drive wherever we wanted to go, and unless there's call for service, we can be proactive. The thought of not being in an office wearing a shirt and tie Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, was the most appealing aspect of that line of work. No exciting things happened. We didn't chase anybody. We didn't get into pursuits or fights. It was the most mundane, boring law enforcement officer day ever, and I loved it.
Was there a flashpoint that at some point you just said, okay, I'm typing up my resignation and I'm going to register for the police academy, and that's it, I'm out?
Yes, I remember that day very vividly, because in order for me to make this change, I was going to have a grueling plan that was going to take about a year. So leaving my financial advisor job to transition into law enforcement is not a quick process. The police academy itself is about 8 months long. And it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So I had to resign from my financial advisor job just to attend the police academy. So I have a lot of hurdles here. I need to get through the police academy for 8 months. How am I going to, afford to live and take care of myself through this 8-month period? So I had to come up with a very elaborate plan and exactly how I'm going to achieve all of these hurdles in order to make this career change. I applied for the police academy in Daytona Beach College, Daytona State College, got accepted, and to put money in my pocket, I went from financial advisor, making a good salary plus bonuses and benefits, to valet parking cars at a hotel on the beachside.
Wow.
Very humbling experience.
Yeah.
I went to the police academy Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
And you don't get paid when you go to police academy.
No,
you have to pay for it.
In fact, I owed them $4,000 to $6,000.
Okay.
Plus books, plus uniforms, and plus. And I had to live off savings, and I got minimum wage plus tips at valet parking cars. So right after the police academy was over, I would quickly change clothes in my car and go straight to the hotel and start valet parking cars until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. After 11 o'clock at night, I'd go home and I'd study till about midnight to 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm right back in the police academy at 8 o'clock in the morning. I did that for 8 months. It was ramen noodles and hot dogs, and it was very humbling experience.
Right. So, and when you go to police academy, you don't have a guarantee of a job when you graduate, right?
No. And I later found out the hard way of that. You go through the police academy. You need each block of instruction has an exam. You need to pass every single one of them: legal, DUIs, crimes against people, crimes against this, report writing, traffic stops. All block of instruction has some have a practical, such as firearms and defensive tactics. You have to practically show you can do something, and then there's an academic aspect of it where you have to pass that test.
Right.
You have to pass each block, no problem. After you've successfully passed everything, you then have to take a state exam, which incorporates everything. Once you pass the state exam, you are then you're then certified to be a law enforcement with any agency in the state of Florida. So once you get over all of those hurdles, you then have to go find a job.
And where did you find a job?
Well, the hiring process is very extensive. The application alone with agencies is approximately 40 to 50 pages long. They want all of your information. They want your neighbor's information, your naturalization papers, your social security information, any military background, college. They want all of your your close family members' information so they can make sure you're not a gang member. They want your naturalization papers, tax returns, credit reports, driving records. They want everything. Then you start a long background process. You have a psychological evaluation. You have a physical agility test. So the hiring process in itself is months long. So I got rejected 9 times before a local agency in Volusia County called Ormond Beach Police Department believed in me. They interviewed 30 to 40 people for one spot. And I got it.
You got the spot.
I got the spot. I got hired there alone. I went through all of their in-house training alone. It was only one spot.
So how do you take a career where you have a lot of earning potential and arguably a lot of stability and go into something that, it's government pay, and let's be honest, it's a lot more dangerous?
Yes. When I was sitting at my desk holding my resignation letter in my hand, I had this moment of, are you really about to do this? Are you really about to leave this job for this massive question mark? You have to move back with your mom's house. You have to go find a grunt job just to get by. And what if you don't get hired? It's a lot of question marks, but I realized the greatest things in life are just on the other side of that fear. You have to step out there and take a chance or nothing's ever going to happen to you. So you just have to believe in yourself and just go, I'm going to be a successful person regardless of what path I take, because my mental aspect is going to overcome all of those hurdles. So you just had to take a step out there.
So there was no apprehension about, nobody's going to come up to my skyscraper and start shooting at me.
We don't talk about it a lot, but if the aspect of every day where I come into work today, it's a much higher probability versus being a financial advisor that this might be my last day working. I could get killed today in the line of work. And it might not be from a bad guy. I might be responding lights and sirens to a call and get into a car crash.
Right.
It could be completely accidental. I'm constantly injecting in situations that the common person hardly ever is injected to. So that is a possibility, but I'm very careful at work. I make sure I'm clear-headed, I'm thinking things, making good decisions, and to try to minimize that risk. But this may sound crazy, but it is my privilege, because this job is a privilege. This is not a right. This is not your typical job. It is my privilege being able to serve the people of this community. It's a privilege.
So that's a good transition. What is your philosophy with law enforcement? How do you approach it philosophically?
I really try to approach law enforcement to where it is an honor that I've been selected to serve the people in this community. It's an honor, and I have to earn that honor every single day. And it's not a us against them mentality. It is law enforcement. Law enforcement needs the community just as much as the community needs law enforcement. It's a partnership. It is not a us against them. It is law enforcement plus the community against the scumbags looking to victimize and take advantage of people that don't have the ability to or just can't take up for themselves. And that's the way I approach law enforcement. This is an honor.
So you have to, when you go out on a call, many times there's a highly emotional situation.
Yes.
And you have to de-escalate situations all the time.
All the time.
Right? So, but, we've seen law enforcement in action, and some people are just nuts, right? And a lot of crazy things happen out there. How do you maintain your cool?
It depends on the circumstance. Sometimes things are highly emotional because they should be highly emotional. I've been on calls where, somebody has lost a loved one, or somebody is a victim of something that's really, really going to impact their lives, and they're highly emotional because of that. So they have every right to be emotional. On those types of calls, I just empathize, take a step back. That requires a completely different deputy. It requires a deputy that's compassionate and understanding and empathize, patient. It requires that. However, there's other calls where things are nuts, out of control, and they don't need to be. So that type of call requires a deputy that's going to take charge, take control of the situation, whatever that may or may not be. So taking control and handling things, it just varies so greatly from call to call to call. And also, as law enforcement, we have to compartmentalize each call, and that's very difficult to do sometimes. I might have just gone on a call where I was fighting and chasing and tasing and going crazy on somebody because they're fighting or trying to get away from us. And my very next call is a lady that's emotional and because she woke up and found her husband of 40 years has passed away. My mind might still be on that exciting call I just left 10 minutes ago. However, this call requires a completely different aspect of the human psyche. And you have to be able to keep switching those hats all day long. And sometimes that is challenging.
We have to address the fact that you perform your job on live TV sometimes.
Yes.
Right. So there's a show on the Reels channel called On Patrol Live, and it's on every Friday and Saturday night.
Reels and Peacock.
And you are one of the law enforcement officers that they follow with a live camera.
Why not contact another law enforcement officer who's right in front of you and let them know that a person that's trying to pull you over that's impersonating law enforcement? That makes no sense. I'm in a fully marked unit.
So we know maybe a little bit more about you than we might know about just some cop that we pass on the road.
Yes.
You don't suffer fools.
I do not. I do not.
Well, you got a ticket.
You got a ticket now. You got a felony now, and you're minus a motorcycle.
That's fine.
How do you square that with the philosophical approach to community policing? Like, how does that fit in? Because there are a lot of people who don't like what you do.
They
and
are.
There are a lot of people that love what you do.
Yes. Some people, our society is slowly morphing into this society where people are becoming unreasonable, selfish, entitled. They're up in this high horse that they really don't deserve to be on. And I feel, just on a personal level, that when I encounter these types of people, they need to be reminded the world does not revolve around them. My clientele has changed from people with bad financial habits to people who need my help in law enforcement. My clients are not criminals. My clients are the victims of the people in this community. My clients are the people that need my help. I don't cater and pander to the criminals, the bad guys, the people looking to victimize, the people that are completely wasting my time when I could be directing that energy towards somebody who legitimately needed my help, expertise, advice, whatever that may be. So those people that think whatever their ridiculous behavior is acceptable and is okay, somebody needs to remind them it is not okay. And I just think that should be one of those people.
So what is it like doing your job on live TV? How does it change anything, or does it?
It really doesn't change much of anything. I'm the same way when I'm not on television versus when I am on television. I have a lot of pride and love for what I do, and sometimes that does come out during the course of the day. What you see is what you get. I've been doing this 11, 12 years. My career is going fantastic. I'm not going to edit myself or change the way I do business to try to please somebody that's watching me and is going to comment on Facebook. I really don't care.
You were also on Live PD before. Walk me through how that happened originally. Like, did somebody come to you, or did somebody come to the sheriff's office and say who would be great, or did you have to kind of put your name in a hat?
No, there was no putting your name in a hat of that. We were selected. We were selected from command staff. From what I gather, the show showed interest in being a part of our culture and our ideologies here at the sheriff's office. And the command staff agreed. They wanted us to be part of that show. And the command staff selected people who they want to be on the show.
What does it mean to you personally to be such a public face of the sheriff's office?
Personally, I am quite honestly honored. Anybody that knows me personally knows that I just want to come to work. I just want to do a phenomenal job as a patrol deputy, and that's it. I don't really care about the awards and the TV stuff.
So along with it, though, does have to come some level of celebrity.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you're on TV every week.
Yes.
You're recognizable. We know your name. We know who you are. We see you. What's your favorite part of all that?
When I go into a restaurant and somebody starts freaking out because they recognize me from television and they say, I love you on television. They want to take selfies and autographs. That is where I get my joy. I like that aspect of it. The fact that I'm just a measly, humble deputy from some kid that grew up in the ghetto in Daytona Beach. And the fact that I walk into a restaurant and I completely brighten somebody's day because they see me on TV, yelling at some snowflake Karen, and they want a selfie with me, that's where I get my joy.
I'm always curious, like when there's a chase and somebody's running from you at 138 miles an hour and they're blowing through every red light and every stop sign, and they're crossing people's properties and crashing into other cars and everything. What does the paperwork look like after you finally apprehend that guy? What is that like? Are there just like pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of charges?
Yes. The charges rack up pretty quickly. And it doesn't even have to be a chase. We can have something way less than that. The paperwork adds up pretty big. There's tons of charges you have to figure out, but over the years, I can figure out charges and really quickly. Now, for a new person, a call like that would be an absolute logistical nightmare. But once you've actually made it successful and you've made it to this certain level of law enforcement, actually it's not that bad, because anything you practice, you'll get good at.
Right.
The longest aspect of the paperwork is something we call the narrative. And the narrative is simply telling a story from start to finish of everything that happened. So calls like that, the narrative, you pretty much are writing a college term paper, but I know what to put in the narrative. My typing speed's pretty high, so it's not that bad.
In 2021, Royce received a pretty big accolade when he was named Law Enforcement Officer of the Year by the state of Florida. That happened after he solved a case while working an overtime shift. He received a call about a missing juvenile.
The juvenile was 12 years old at the time, and she was supposed to finish school, go to a basketball game, and after the basketball game, they were supposed to pick her up. Well, they went to the basketball game, and they realized she never made it to the basketball game. So I started asking this typical questions, what's she like? Is she into drugs? Is there any arguments? How's her grades? None of the boxes were checked. This kid was fantastic. Good grades, good behavior, good school, good home life, never ran away before. So once again, that why intrigued me. I was like, this is not normal. This wasn't your typical, we got into an argument, she gets bad grades, and she runs away once a week. This was not that situation. So it caused me to dig a little deeper. So I called one of the juvenile's friends at school, and I said, hey, what happened at school today? And I'm told a story of, well, yeah, she says she met some guy, and they're gonna have a sleepover later today after school. But again, the kid I was talking to is like 10 or 11. So I'm like, well, it kind of has some merit to it, but it could be some kid just, talking. So I go, well, where does the juvenile go when she gets out of school? And they go, well, she likes to go over to the local Family Dollar store. So I go, all right. So at this point, I'm just connecting bouncing balls. So I go to the Family Dollar. I review video starting about the time when school gets out. Right on cue, the juvenile walks into the store. And she has a phone, but it only works on the internet. So I see her playing with her phone, obviously connecting to the internet at this store. So you can tell she's talking with somebody. Well, I watch her for almost 45 minutes to an hour in this store, obviously waiting for somebody. The store doesn't have any exterior cameras, so I'm just hoping and praying this guy walks in. He never does. At some point, I see her look out the front doors. You could tell she recognizes somebody, and she walks out, and that was it. That's all I had. When I was on the phone with the juvenile's best friend, I said, well, who's this guy she's supposed to meet? She goes, I don't know anything about him other than I think he lives in Orlando, and his name starts with a T. That's it. That's all I had. I didn't have much. So I go out to my patrol car, and I go, man, this sounds probably legit. So I Google local hotels in the area. And I start going to every hotel one by one to try to find her. But by now I'm a couple of hours into this call, which presents another problem. The clerk that's on duty at this hotel might have not have been the clerk on duty when they arrived, or maybe he already got the hotel room and just took her in the room. Yeah. So not only do I have to show a photo of her, I decided to go through the check-ins one by one, and I'm looking for an anomaly. But I'm seeing families from out of town, elderly couples, until I get to the fourth hotel, I believe. And I noticed one of the people that checked in was a young man. His name was Tyler, and he was out of Orlando.
There's the T.
There's my Orlando. He's a 22 or 3-year-old guy by himself. This all fits. This fits my puzzle piece. So that ultimately led me to the hotel room where I knocked on the door, and he opened it up.
Front office, anybody inside? We need to come in for a second. Sheriff's office, back up. Have a seat on the couch. Where's What's up, sweetheart? Sheriff's office. Get Pappy up here. Go in the bedroom and wait for me for a second. How old are you? 5. How old are you?
501 tax.
Just wait there for me, sweetheart, okay? Are you okay? Do you need any Are you hurt at all? You're not hurt at all? Your stomach hurts? Okay, we're gonna be right with you, okay? 335. Yeah, you up. How old are you? If I ask you that question again, I'm gonna lose my mind. How old are you?
Where's your adrenaline at this point?
Oh, you
Through the roof.
Yeah.
Through the roof. It's adrenaline, it's excitement, it's, oh God, I hope I'm not too late. There's all kind of emotions running through me at this point. I knock on the door, he opens it, and we have a thing in law enforcement called mere suspicion. It's a term to describe our gut feeling. It's a hunch. We can't really act on it, but we all develop this sixth sense of being in this job. And the second he opened the door, because when I knocked on the door, I didn't announce myself as law enforcement. I announced myself as like housekeeping or something like that. So he expects when he opens the door, it's going to be housekeeping there. When he opens the door and he sees a 6'2", 230-pound deputy standing there, the look on his face was all I needed to know. My mere suspicion told me I'm in the right place. So I walked in, and I announced myself as a sheriff's office, and the juvenile who was in the back room heard it was a sheriff's office. And if you watch the video, she comes running from the room and jumps into my arms. So that was a great feeling. That moment right there is why I do this job.
Now, at that point, you don't know anything that has happened other than I found
right.
who I'm looking for.
All I know is I found her. She's not dead in a ditch somewhere. Whatever else happened, however bad it possibly is, I found her alive and safe. We can work with the other stuff thereafter.
Right. And now what about the perpetrator?
I have some choice words, as if you watch the show, you can possibly imagine the dialogue that was with him. I have some choice words with him to make sure he knows he's not free to go. He's detained. He's to do everything we ask him to do. And if he opposes us, something very bad will happen to him, possibly not good for his health. And he doesn't give us any trouble at all once that precedent was set.
How quickly are things set in motion at that point? You know, how quickly are cuffs on him? How quickly is she brought to somebody who she can talk to, a professional, right? Because obviously there's all those aspects of this.
Right. Actually, it's the adverse to that we need to slow things way down at this point. We found her. We have him detained. At this point, we need to slow down because there's a lot of legal aspects involved in a type of case like this where if we go too fast or we miss one of those T's or don't dot one of those I's, it's going to cost a conviction down the road. We want a conviction. So we need to slow things way down and remember the basics of law enforcement. We need search warrants for certain things. We need, certain things we need to slow way down. So at that point, my job is effectively done. I found her. I found him. Now we need to bring in crime scene people. We need to bring in detectives. We need to get search warrants here. So we need to slow things way down at that point.
You made national news with that story for good reason.
I did.
And so tell me about the aftermath. Where are we at today?
That case is closed. He got sentenced to 40 years in prison.
Good for him.
And that's going to be a rough 40 years due to the publicity of that case. Everybody in prison is going to know what that guy did because of the sheer magnitude of the publicity that case got.
What advice would you give to somebody who's in a career that maybe they liked at one point or don't love or they're kind of thinking about leaving, but they're afraid to make that leap? What advice would you give them about pursuing a second act?
If you want to change your career into something you want to do versus it's just a job, my advice would be to make a well-formulated plan and go for it. Any good long-term decision that you make in life is going to suck in the beginning. And that's true with anything. anything that's good for you that's going to take a long time to achieve is going to suck. Planning for retirement sucks. Raising your kids sucks in the beginning. Marriage and relationships, things have their hurdles, but keep the end goal in mind. And if you want something in life, go get it. Period.
Scott, bravo on another great episode. I love Royce's story. A couple of things were interesting to me. First of all, just how difficult this transition was. Huge financial challenges, eating ramen noodles and hot dogs for 8 months. And then once he got his degree, once he graduated, finding a job, was no easy hill to climb either.
Yeah, well, I think, if you look back in Royce's life, there were a lot of hills that he had to climb, right? Growing up in the ghettos of Daytona Beach, getting into financial advising, right? He didn't even have a college degree, and yet he built an incredible career there. And then, of course, transitioning into law enforcement. Yeah, I mean, if you looked at all the things that had to happen and had to go right, it's almost incredible that he made the decision to do it, yet he did, and he's unbelievably successful now.
The other element that really caught my attention was the impact of the ride-along. Going out and being in a police car with real police officers on duty. It sounds like that was really the key to jumping into this new path.
It really was, right? He talked about seeing some police activity from the confines of the skyscraper that he was standing in and thinking it was interesting, but then he took that next step. And he went on a ride-along, which I didn't even know that people could do. I guess I've heard about it, but I didn't know that just anybody could kind of do it. But he did it, and he did it more than once. And what was really interesting about it is that on that first ride-along, they didn't do anything that exciting, but he loved every second of it, and it really sealed his next move.
Well, thanks for bringing Royce's story to our listeners. It's a great one.
It's an absolute pleasure, and it was an honor to sit with him. Like I said before, if you want to see Royce James in action, you can tune in to On Patrol Live. It's on every Friday and Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Reels channel, and it streams on Peacock. You never know what's going to happen, but I can guarantee it's always interesting.
We hope you'll keep listening and subscribe to Second Act Stories on your favorite podcast app. We hope you'll like us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn, and share the podcast with your friends. So don't go away. There are more Second Act Stories just around the corner.